Hi, I'm Luis, and we're going to be making some blueberry pie with the perfect pie crust. I'm going to be making one by hand using a pastry cutter and one with the food processor. So I'm going to show you how to do it. Right now we just have some all-purpose Anita flour in here with some zest of a lime and butter. So we're going to chop it all up first. What we're going to do is just pulse it to go slowly, and we are aiming to have about pea-sized butter shapes. So I'm just going to go ahead. Here we are. Now everything has been chilled. I want to make sure it's as cold as possible so that when I'm working the dough, I don't have any of the butter melt on me. If all your flour doesn't fit in the food processor, then you can just do it in stages, like I am doing. So now with that, I'm going to toss it all together. Now we're going to have ice cold water. I did about 3/4 water and then 1/4 of the weight of water in ice, so I can have it as cold as possible. And I'm going to dissolve the salt into the water. Just add your salt in and then whisk it up. And I have chilled all my baking equipment. So I have 2 pastry cutters and I just had them in the freezer so they're as cold as possible. I'm actually not going to be using my hands, so I'm a very warm person, so I don't want to melt the dough. I'm just going to work with the pastry cutters in kneading it together. So I am going to add the water to our bowl with all the butter and flour. And I'm just to avoid touching it again, I'm gonna use a wooden spoon just to get it started. I'm gonna use the bottom of it just because that's how I like to do it. And once I get rough dough going, then I will start using the pastry cutters. So again, I'm just gonna be moving it all together, get this shaggy texture. That's what we want, because we're going for flakiness over here. So once you start getting that going, then we can start. Either if you're a cold person and your hands don't get super warm, you can work quickly and knead it by hand. I just prefer doing it with the pastry cutters because it makes life so much easier. And again, I am not touching it with my hands. I'm just using this wooden spoon so I don't start melting the butter in the kneading process. But right now it looks good. So we are just gonna tip it on over onto our work surface. Oh. So now, these are chilled and I'm gonna work with it, come underneath and pat it down. By doing this, we'll create more and more layers of the butter while also forming a dough. So it's just gonna take a little bit of practice, but we come on under and push down. Come on under, push down, under and down. Same thing. So all the dough and the butter is touching is these cold pastry cutters. Just keep going and you'll start to get more and more of a dough. As you can see, it's getting more uniform. If your dough is very dry, have a little bit of water on reserve and just add, I would suggest tablespoon by tablespoon. And as well, if it's too wet, then have some flour on the side and all of this chilled and to add more if need be. But most likely you will not need more. As you see here, it's coming together. It's actually feeling very, very nice. You see all these pieces of butter, which is exactly what we want in order to have a flaky crust. Shout out to me for coming up with this technique, because I'm a warm person. here we are. And there is a little bit of zest in the dough, just to give it a nice spontaneous flavor. You can't really see it, it's just very little, but it's just enough to make a difference with the overall taste. I'm just gonna dust some flour on. Whenever you put on flour, just make sure you don't put on a ton. Little by little is always the best bet. So I'm gonna divide this into halves, just so I can make it easier for myself to work with. So I cut down the middle. Look at that, gorgeous. And I'm gonna work with this one just a little bit more and then shape it into a disc. And we wanna make sure we shape it into a disc so it's easier for us to roll it out. We could just form it into a ball, but we're gonna let it cool and harden more in the fridge for an hour, 2 hours. So we wanna make sure that it is as easy as possible once it comes out of there. I'm just gonna put that into a bag, or if you have any Ziploc or what's it called? Cling wrap. So I'm gonna wrap it up, leave it in the fridge, let it rest. Okay, so right now I've just finished up cutting in the butter into the flour, and we're right about ready to mix in the water. Again, we want to get these whole bunch of pea-like flakes. It's almost like sandy. But this is exactly what we want. Some people do it larger chunks of butter. I prefer mine not super large. I like mine fairly small. And I'm gonna add in the water that has been dissolved with salt. I've kept some reserve water just in case I need more, and with a wooden spoon, just so I do not touch the butter and start getting it warm, I will begin to mix the water into it. So as you can see, I keep moving the bowl as I can mix everything into it. So as I'm pulling down and getting the water all mixed in and hydrating the flour, it will begin to form a shaggy dough, as you can see here, and we'll start. Okay, so I'm just gonna form everything together with this bench scraper here, start patting it down, and then I'm gonna toss it out onto our work surface. So now, 2 chilled pastry cutters. I'm gonna go under the dough and come on top and press down. Now I'm gonna start forming my dough. Now I'm just kneading my 1/2, getting a little bit more uniform. I'm gonna start shaping it into a disc. After I shape it into a disc, I'm gonna put it in a plastic bag or some cling wrap, and we're gonna chill it for a few hours. So our pie dough has chilled for about 2 hours. I just took it out and we're gonna begin. I lightly floured our work surface. So now we are just gonna spread it. So I'm gonna press down on it little by little by little by little. This will make it easier in rolling it out. So every time we roll, move it 45 degrees. Do a turn. Turn. I have very nice big shape. Somewhere we're gonna fold it. If it's sticky, just add a little bit of flour. Put the pie dough down. Put it on here. Now don't cut it before you nestle it in here. Run your fingers down. Work quickly so you don't warm up the butter a ton. With a knife, I will bring this up with my hand and I will run it around the edge and I will cut. I will cut. Boom. Rocking and rolling. Okay, so now we are going to do the top of the pie. So I just took out my dough from cooling. It's been cooling for around 2 hours. Now, every time we roll it, we're gonna move it 45 degrees, 45-degree turn. I'm just gonna fill it with some blueberries right now. So now we have a cohesive layer of blueberries. With a pastry cutter or a very sharp knife, we're gonna run some lines down. It doesn't need to be completely straight. You don't have to do it with a ruler. If you wish to, you can. However, I am just gonna go for it and eyeball it. Trim the edges, so we don't need too much. We're just gonna tuck it in. So I'm just gonna tuck these underneath the main crust. Under the bottom crust. Just tuck it in very gently. I'm gonna be gentle but quick so you don't melt that tart. Here we have the lattice all finished. Now we're just gonna leave it in the fridge or the freezer for a little bit, let it firm up. This will let the dough not shrink back as much once it's being cooked. Next, we're gonna egg wash it and top it with turbinado sugar. And then it's gonna go in the oven at 400 degrees for around 20 minutes. And then we're gonna turn the oven way down and cook it for around 40 minutes. So now that our pie has cooled for a little bit, I got egg wash going. I used 2 yolks, an egg, tiny little bit of salt and whole milk. And now I'm just gonna brush the top, and we don't make sure we don't put a lot of egg wash. We just wanna do a nice even coating. So now that we egg washed it, let's sprinkle it with some turbinado sugar. And this will caramelize very nicely. You guys enjoyed the video. We have this perfect flaky crust blueberry pie. Hope you give it a try and let us know how it goes.